Welcome to the future of jobs and careers, where we try to understand the jobs and careers of the future. So, we've broken down a lot of the components of what the jobs and careers of the future might look like. We've talked a lot about the different jobs that will be out there and some of the moves that you can make. But we're really focusing in on what are the specific things that you can do to design your career. What are the actions you can take today? What are the things to think about to design your career the way you want it to be and to set yourself up for the future? So, the future frameworks that we've got, just a reminder, we've got these 3 skills that we believe are important for the future. Entrepreneurship, that's your ability to spot, evaluate, and act on opportunities. Innovation, that's your ability to generate ideas, select ideas, and have an improvement process. And then your understanding of tech. This is your ability to leverage technology to get whatever it is you need to get done, done. And then the 2 phases of the next decade that we're seeing, or that at least I'm seeing, are the age of AI productivity. This is basically from 2025 to 2030, people getting more productive with AI and starting to understand how they can use that in their work. And then after that comes the age of robotic automation. And that's when you start to see more of the autonomous vehicles, the humanoid robots, all of those things. And that's a whole different ball game than the age of AI productivity. So those are the 2 phases to think about. And a lot of people kind of lump them into one, but those are happening at 2 different times. Those are 2 different timelines. Though, one thing to keep in mind, the AI models of today are probably going to be the brains of the robots tomorrow. All right. Now, with that out of the way, for today, we are diving into today's big question of how to design your career. And this comes in 2 segments. It's the power of relationships, and then there's keeping up with technology. So we'll go through each of those individually. And before we get to that, let's introduce these lovely faces that you got on screen here. If you're watching the video, if this is the podcast feed, know that our lovely faces are staring right at you. All right. So I'm Alec Kaufman. I'm the founder of Annovation. Annovation does tech and strategy for small businesses. And it's really all about helping you use the right technology at the right time to save you time. I do process improvement, automation, and tech coaching and advising. And really, if you don't know when to use a hammer, you won't know when to use it. That's kind of one of the things that I always say, and that's what I'm all about helping people do, is know what tools they can use and when to use them. All right, Scott?
Hello, well, and good day to everybody. My name is Scott Jacobs. I'm the founder and principal of Jacobs Strategic Group. We worked very hard to elevate companies and careers. I believe in human contact, communication, and that connection that is all of value. And that's one of the discussions we're going to have as it pertains particularly to the robotics element. But as a career coach, I work with a number of different levels of talent and levels of experience, and we work to connect them to the job that fits them best. And then I'm a small business advisor. I work with business owners to maximize their productivity, align sales and marketing, and ultimately increase their overall profitability and valuation.
Excellent. Aoife?
Hi, everyone. So I am Aoife Holden, and that is how you pronounce it, Aoife. I am founder and principal of Saoirse Consulting and Coaching. So my purpose is to empower leaders to transform and thrive. And how I do that is I do both. I have decades of experience in healthcare, and there I focus on leading transformation and providing strategic advice. How do you be strategic about how you optimize and transform your business and change, right? Change in the midst of uncertainty, which we're going to talk about too today. I'm a certified leadership coach. I am also an expert facilitator. So the other part is, which we're going to talk about today in terms of relationships. And I love what you shared, Scott, about connection, very important. And in any relationship, there's conflict. So one of the things that we're going to dive into is negotiation and how do you navigate and manage that. That can have levels and layers of conflict. So I am a conflict management specialist. I run towards conflict, and I love helping people thrive in the midst of conflict. Thank you.
All right. And so we're going to dive right into it. So Aoife take it away with the power of relationships.
Well, thank you. Just to reiterate, welcome everyone for coming today. As we talk about the emphasis on this is your career, it's not just a job, and thinking about how do you make an impact, right? How do you feel like you're having a meaningful career and that you're leading with purpose? But first, I want to dive into some statistics just so we can get grounded on the state of the state today. So just thinking about that, I'm going to share some from Gallup in 2024 found that over half of US employees are actively job hunting and only 18% feel extremely satisfied in their current role. So this is a signal, right? In the job market in 2025, we are experiencing significant change, right? A survey from the Montlona Athletic Club's list reveals some key trends I want to highlight. Job seekers feel uncertain due to economic concerns and burnout. Employer and employee branding and company culture and values and what you stand for are increasingly important because as job seekers, they research potential employers before applying. So having mission-driven organizations, a lot of my clients, we talk about their values and how does it align with the companies that they're looking at, right? And it's not just a matter, I'll emphasize here, of putting a poster on the wall and saying this is our mission, our values, but how do you actually live out your values in the behavior as a leader throughout the organizations? And that is something, today with social media, a lot of employees look at as they're researching companies. So how do we shift from survival mode, right, to building careers that actually fulfill us? That's what we heard to talk about today. And I wanted to highlight in our part one, we did talk about how the traditional career path is no longer what exists today, right? The idea of a linear career path is no longer what is, right? So how do we then navigate this terrain, this new terrain of building a career? So that's what we're going to dive in. So just I wanted to call that out to take a look at the part one as we set the stage for what we're going to talk about today and dive into skills such as we talked about number one, relationships. We're also going to talk about how to build influence, how to negotiate with confidence, right? And then we're going to, in part three, which is another series we're going to talk about, is putting that all together in terms of how do you build your personal brand. So before we dive in, I've got a couple of questions here I'm going to launch. Any adds to that, Scott or Alec? I see you smiling over there, Scott. So anything to add to that?
Absolutely. A couple of things. I think as we evaluate some of the great things that you just talked about, I think it's important to define and not put in a box some of the words. For example, negotiation. Negotiation is not negotiating a transaction in this case. Negotiation can be a resolution. It can be part of facilitation. It can be part of interaction. But when it comes to job seekers in particular and working on your specific career, a point that you made that I think is critical, and I advise all my clients in the career coaching space, is to do your homework, to take a look at this organization, look for feedback, have informational interviews internally so that you can understand if your values align with that culture. And I think a lot of if you look at the 50% of the people are actively looking for jobs, the big question is why. And what's interesting today, majority of the time, it's not always money. It is a lot of other things. There's conflicts with coworkers or bosses that can't be resolved. They don't feel that the company aligns with their values. The work environment is unhealthy, and I think that those are the things that employers need to recognize if they are going to help manage retention. And I'm not going to go into that big tangent about the cost of retention, but at this point, but your points that you made, Aoife, were spot on. Thank you.
And I'll add in here, I think when just to get back to what part one was, when we're looking at part one, we've taught which we talked about kind of the risks of traditional employment, we talked a lot about some of those challenges that the traditional employment system has had. A lot of people we taught to be employees, but we didn't teach them to be entrepreneurs or owners. But one of the challenges is you now have to be more of an owner of your career. You have to be an entrepreneur around your career, what that is going to be to you, what that means, and how you can actually take charge and drive your career rather than just taking more of the passive route of whatever happens, happens. I think you have to be more in the driver's seat of your career and determining what you want to do and really trying to steer the ship of where you want your career to go. So that past session was more on how has that changed? This session is more on the skills that you need to build and the ways that you can kind of prepare yourself. And so listen to both and then listen to our part 3 as well when that comes out next month.
Alec, I'd like to add to what you said, or at least clarify. I think many of our audience interprets entrepreneurship as a business owner. But what you're referencing is a mindset. A mindset of entrepreneurs is that you manage and control your outputs, your destiny, and your career path. It doesn't mean that you have to own a company to be an entrepreneur.
And Scott, to add to that, it's something that came up in my coaching session this week. That one of the things about entrepreneurship, it's about building, right? Building and developing. A client is in a large organization, and we talked about that. It's her desire to be able to build and develop things, right? And that is entrepreneurial, right?
Sure.
Within the company. Um, so that's to your point, just adding to that point, that is being innovative, and if that's an area that you enjoy and how you think about things differently, and which dives into when we think about relationships, right? About how do you connect with people, as you had brought up earlier, and build relationships. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? What's the best way to approach that, building connections?
Alec, you want to try first, or I'm happy to go?
I can jump in here. I think
All right.
authenticity is a big part of it. I think a lot of people want to build a relationship uh, in a way that, like you see the Instagram side of the relationship of this is what I look like on social media. But I think you want that authenticity, that personal touch that makes you you. I mean, I'm not saying you have to just throw all your personal information out there, but if you're really passionate about skiing or rafting, those are some of my favorite things. I do the weird niche sport of whitewater stand-up paddleboarding. But, you know, those little elements of that make you really human and really able to connect with people. And I think that's an important part of building those relationships. Now, I'm not saying you have to lead with that though. You can also just go talk to people. I think a lot of people get afraid of that first part. It's just talk with people. Then from talking with people, talk more, find common interests, and then build that.
Well, I find that when you make connections, that the true gift is listening and showing interest in what they do. People love to talk about themselves, and if you can, fastest way to earn trust, respect, and alignment with individuals is relating to them. And as you mentioned, if I was uh, a stand-up whitewater paddleboarder, you and I would have something in common immediately, right? And I work with my clients that when they know who they're interviewing with, to dig deep, find out where they went to school, check and see if you can find out what their major was, identify the companies they used to work for, something that could make you click, something that can make you in common, but let them tell their story, let them feel heard. And I think that takes connection to the next level. And one of the areas that we were going to talk about today was, the skills of networking, and that really is communicating and relating to human beings.
And I love what you shared, Scott, about that is as you're looking at companies or building connections, right? LinkedIn, right? It's a great place to look and see maybe this person, came from the Midwest where I went to school, for example, or just exploring what is the sort of thing you're curious about, right? The other thing I loved, and this came up with one of my sessions this week, is thinking about asking someone as they're looking to move up in the organization that they're at, or in another organization, is asking the person what inspires you about being here. um, the other thing, I think it's always helpful when you're building relationships. And for some people, it can be rather daunting, right? To walk into a room with a group of people, or simply making a connection. Is always have a list of questions handy. One of my clients raised the question. I love this question because I thought, wow, it opens up such an interesting topic. One of his questions that he asks is, "So, what were you like in high school?" So, it's always,
Yeah.
yeah, right. So it's always interesting. I would advise to just have a list of questions ready if that is rather daunting for you to make the connection, so you could feel a bit more confident, leading into that conversation. And at the end of the day, they're people too. The other aspect that comes up with building relationships is, I think, in companies, or I think in people in other careers, is just reaching out to have a conversation and get to know them and be curious. And perhaps, especially if you're exploring whether other industries or other careers, like you said, Scott, people love to talk about themselves, and just go in, be curious, be open. I love what you shared about active listening. One of the things I always remember is that we have uh, one mouth and two ears. So for a reason. Um,
My wife reminds me of that as well,
yeah,
Aoife.
I need to remind myself of that sometimes. So, so yeah, just be open and be curious. And I do think once you start small and experiment, that you can build on that. And I think when you make that connection, there's such a spark and such an energy with that, to build on that baseline.
Well, and I think one thing that a lot of people end up doing is they watch different people and they're like, man, that guy's so great at networking. But how did that person get really good at networking? Because these are skills, and skills are developed over time and repetition. So that person has probably talked with people several times. They might have talked with hundreds of people, thousands of people. It might be, even more than that. So when you watch someone and you say, man, that person's so good at networking, they might be on their thousandth iteration of their networking skill.
Mhm.
And you might be on your fifth, sixth, seventh networking event. So, you know, give yourself the grace of understanding what iteration are you on, and you can strive for being at that level that that person's at, but realize the time that that person has put in and the repetition that that person has put in to refine that skill to that point, and realize you can get there too. It just takes that time and repetition and refinement.
That's an interesting point you brought up, Alec. It's not just repetition on networking or talking, it's maintaining a consistent professional brand, in my mind, in regards to that. So, an interesting thing is, a couple of weeks ago, I happened to be at um, a recruitment group of marketers. And I met a lot of new people in the unemployed in the marketing business here in Portland. And last weekend, I attended an AI 4-hour AI for business event, and five of the people that I saw 2 weeks ago were there as well, right? And so what happens is the frequency of contact deepens the relationship and the rapport, because we saw them, since I saw them in a different space on a different topic, all of a sudden those barriers are broken, and we're smiling, shaking hands, and going, hey, you know, so you develop that level of understanding and connection. And then if you can reiterate to that individual what you talked about 2 weeks ago, it makes all the difference in the world. And those are the kind of people that you can refer in your network, excuse me, to others that might want to connect with their knowledge, with their contacts, and the companies they have connections with. So, I look at that. It doesn't have to be daunting. It doesn't even have to be staged. It can be very natural, at least for me, in regards to if you meet somebody, you remember what you talked about, you run into them again, and you can reiterate what you learned from them. The level of respect goes up immensely. We've all been there where we walked up and go, "Oh, I know I met you before. I can't remember your name," right? Well, that happens. And for me, sometimes but I do remember what you do. And that can change everything because people love for others to recognize their talents, their strengths, and their skills.
I love what you shared there, Scott. What's coming up for me is that, uh, an example would be, one of the things I do in healthcare, I lead transformation. So I work with a lot of different disciplines. And often it can be, again, using that word daunting to come into a conversation, a large group, right? You're working across regions on a project. And one of the things I purposely do, I've learned to do, is I spend time with that person who's new. I reach out personally, have a call with them to make sure that they feel supported, to give them some context. I recognize that they're new, and so they know that I'm there to support them, answer any questions. They may not have it at the time, but it's just the purpose of seeing them and recognizing them and bringing them into the fold. I think even small gestures like that are very meaningful to people, because also appreciating, to your point, what they do and their value and helping them with that, helping support them with that, and always coming from the angle of how can I support you? I think sharing, Alec, what you had said about the idea of being authentic, the idea of how can I support you, right? I think that's really important. For people to understand that's what you're there for, if you got anything to help them or offer them.
Well, and Scott, what you were mentioning too, the repetition, right, of showing up to a space over and over again where you're meeting someone for that second time, that third time, that fourth time, I think is also huge. Because that's how you deepen it, as is in those you don't you're not going to tell someone your life story on that first meeting. And then it's that second connection, that second time you meet, that third time you meet, as you build out more and more of your background and you deepen that relationship. And I like to think of this as an example for um like in high school, actually, I had this nice realization that really I could make friends wherever as long as there was like a rock climbing gym or something like that. Because all I
Mm-hmm.
had to do was show up consistently to that space. And if I showed up consistently to that space over and over and over again, I would run into some of the same people. I would start building out those connections. And then through those repeat interactions, we would deepen a connection. And then I would make friends rock climbing. And that's one of those things of building a relationship. And with a workspace, you are frequently showing up and seeing these people over and over and over again, especially with coworkers. So you have those repeat interactions already. The question is, how in a workspace do you deepen that relationship?
I think one of the things that's coming up with me, Alec, is building trust, right? Knowing, I mean, one of the most important things is for me in relationships is having that psychological safety that, they can confide in me. I mean, to me, when I know that somebody feels like they could trust me and confide in me, that is to me sort of such an honor. It means, when we get to that point that they can show, right, themselves in that. So I really strive to build that type of relationship with someone, because there's not a lot of spaces or opportunity for that. And the second thing that's coming up, what you're talking about, is showing up, right? Showing up, being there. One of the things I think about in is building your, and I've heard this word. I'm not, I would say I'm not a big fan of this word. But the language, sort of building your capital or political capital, they say, but really
Yeah.
it's about building your influence in the organization or with people that you work with or with your network. is just building your reputation. And that gets into sort of being visible, right? When you say showing up, one of the things that I have clients who want others to be visible, well, make yourself visible. Let people know who you are.
You made the point that you made was, that McKinsey study was about experience capital and the value of that. But for me, experience and skills are something that you have to continue to grow and be challenged by, right? And many people in whether it be in their careers at the specific job at the specific time or in an educational setting, if you're not challenged and you're just going through the same motions all the time and you're not in an environment that promotes and supports learning and your seek events excellence, in my opinion, um, then you're probably in the wrong place for growth, in the wrong place for your career to continue to move upon that path. And I think a lot of times that's why there's a lot of people changing jobs.
Well, to add to that, I think one of the important part of when you talk about experience capital, what McKenzie calls that, I think it's important, like to me, what comes up are two things, right? Number one is being strategic, how you build your skills, right?
Yes.
Defining sort of who it is you want to be, and then looking around and thinking, what is it that, and or we talked about building those relationships to understand, well, what is it that I need in order to get there, right? The second thing that comes up gets back into now we're talking about negotiation. And what I mean by that is being an advocate for yourself, right? So part of building relationships is advocating for yourself. So once you identify, what it is that you want, the other part is, and certainly I would call out, right, in career coaching, right? A lot of it is helping someone identify what it is that they want. And getting back to relationships, a lot of times talking with people will help you identify that, understanding what sings to you, what inspires you, right? And then understanding what your value is in relation to that, right? And seeking out, letting people, the third thing we talked about is visibility. So letting people know, right, that this is what you want. What I see in coaching is people who are working really hard and expecting someone to see their work. And the reality of it all is, um, that you need to go out and let people know what it is that you do and advocate for yourself and be visible and look at people who are doing what you want to do and talk to them about how they got to that and what are your strengths related to that you could bring to the table. So I'm just kind of playing around with this idea. And it is in somewhat negotiation. One form of that is advocating for yourself. One form of that is letting people know what it is that you want and seeking that out.
I think some people struggle with that, right? Because it's a fine line.
Yes.
You can be perceived as self-promoting,
Hmm.
self-absorbed. What I find interesting, particularly of college grads in college grads in a high tech career space, in a high tech education space, such as, let's say, an electrical engineer, there's, for whatever reason, they've come out of college with the perception that because they have this incredibly challenging degree, that
Hmm.
someone's just going to knock on their door and want them,
Yes.
recruit them, rather than they have to advocate for themselves and differentiate themselves from the thousands of other people that have electrical engineering degrees. And in many cases, I think the higher education system does not do a good job of preparing their graduates for a professional career. And they have the skills, they have the knowledge, they don't have the experience per se. But on the other hand, they could be valuable assets to a growth mindset organization. But they have to be able to talk, they have to be able to communicate, network, and represent themselves in a way that's not, they're not bragging. And that's sometimes difficult for people to do.
You know what? And I would call absolutely, Scott. You hit the nail in the head. Is that the right expression?
On the head.
Yes.
So
But
on
yeah.
the head. Okay, not in the head. Okay. So one of
Ow.
the things one of the things you're bringing up for me is I have some women in tech that I coach, and oftentimes there's an ick, right, around that idea of self promotion. There's
Yes.
this feeling coming out, but also they're in a company, in the ones that I coach are very well known and very highly competitive, right? So you have to, the only way to move forward is not just with your brains, but also letting people know what it is that you do. One of the things I found really successful around that to get the ick out of the way, right, is exploring what the ick is about, like you know, why is there this feeling around that word of self-promotion. But I think what's been successful, if you tie it back to why they show up, why do they do what they do, what is their purpose for doing that, and it creates this two things with one client. Just to share a story, is when we got into her, she was in a tech company. She loved serving her clients, she loved customer service, right? So for her, the passion was around being able to help people with, in this case, the technology and some of the tools. She got a lot of deep satisfaction, and it started when
Yeah.
she was very, very earlier on, when she was an introvert and worked at a grocery store one summer. And it completely transformed her. At first, she was very shy and talking about hiding behind her mother's skirts, to this opening up of really wanting to help and support people. And when she understood that's why she does what she does, it put a whole new light on it, because really it was her driving her purpose to help serve others in this sense, right? In the tech industry. And she was able to translate that skill to what it is that she does, to the point that uh, the other the other ick was being on a panel that she didn't deserve to be there, because everyone around her were highly intelligent, highly successful, that imposter syndrome sunk in. And the thing is, when her boss supported her with that, and when she let that part go and just showed up, and we experimented with that, she was such people had she really showed others and her team that they could be up in that panel, right? So she was building a pathway for everyone else, and that really inspired her. So again, rather than thinking about why should I be there, why would they want me to talk, she also really inspired other women to do that in tech. So it's reframing some of that and really exploring what that's about.
I that's a great story that illustrates it. Go ahead, Alec.
Oh yeah, well, so I think when we're talking about negotiation and we're talking about some of these things that feel a little bit more on the sales side, it's not a skill that we actually get a lot of exposure to.
Yes.
Uh, I mean, my entire engineering education, right? I got a degree in engineering, but there was no course that I would have taken that would have gone over negotiation and sales.
No.
But that's incredibly important for me to actually know that skill to be successful in my career. I was
Mm-hmm.
actually fortunate enough, though, to get exposure to a lot of the things through the entrepreneurship program and through some of these entrepreneurship and innovation classes that actually did touch on some of those skills of how do you actually pitch someone? How do you actually explain what you want? How do you negotiate with someone? And those things are really important so that you understand that you can do those things and that you can actually say, hey, this is what I'm doing. Are you interested in working with me? Those are huge things that really everyone needs to be successful in, because you enter negotiations all the time.
Yes.
They're everywhere. And so you're either going to learn it from an actual educational institution, or you're going to learn it through failures of your negotiations that you end up having when you're not prepared.
That's really interesting because I think you're fortunate. The if I'm not if I'm correct, the standard curriculum for the engineer program at most universities don't include that. That was something that you pursued on your own, and it was kind of, let's just call it your electives. You chose to fill those electives, and there's only a handful of individuals that are accepted into that program, and
Hmm.
therefore the majority though are walking out into their careers without it. And that makes it very difficult. I'd like to flip it around though, and talk about overconfidence for a moment. And Aoife, you've worked in the space enough that specifically we take highly intelligent, professional, highly respected individuals with amazing skills in the medical profession,
Hmm.
and we take, a fantastic surgeon and make them chief of surgery, and all of a sudden they're not equipped with those skills. Tell us a little bit about
Yes.
your experience there.
Yeah, I think that in the case of physicians that I've worked with who are incredible physicians, right?
Yeah.
Incredible at what they do in a clinical setting, and then they're put in these positions without life jacket. And I really feel for them because, I've been in, the space on the administrative side for a long time. And one of the I've had to learn those skills, right? Through trial and error, and then they're just launched in. So, I mean, I think that that's one of the reasons I became a coach, right? That's a perfect opportunity to collaborate with a coach and get some coaching around how to show up as a leader, because it is a different setting. The other part that comes up when we talk about, building relationships and negotiation in when you're navigating as a leader, those are critical skills to have, especially at a higher level. That is a vast majority of what you are doing, trying to influence people and negotiate, right? And that's where it really does help to have some of those skills about, because it's not, again, as we had talked about, the leadership today is not directive, right? It is about more relationship based, I would say. Yeah. So and you do both bring up a good point. It's not something that's really taught in schools. And even in graduate school, it wasn't really taught, negotiation per se. Um, and yeah, it's also one of the things getting back to a lot of these programs have been cut in terms of development, yet they're so crucial.
Mhm. I mean, I think that's going to be one of the skills. I mean, if you look at AI, it's probably going to have a lot of those components of the knowledge pieces that you need,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
it's those softer skills, those pieces of your ability to actually negotiate, your ability to actually build those relationships and things like that, that I think are really valuable skills that every single person really needs to be investing in and understanding. Because at the end of the day, you know, AI doesn't build the relationship. You build the relationship. The humans build the relationships. Uh, and regardless of where AI sits, it's going to sit somewhere um, in the doing tasks and automations and things like that. It's not going to sit in the relationship side. It might be part of it in a way that like maybe you talk to it and it helps you do things, but it's a human to human connection.
And I wanted to call out, it's really hard, right? When we talk about negotiation, because there are multiple layers to it. So what's coming up for me, Scott, from what you shared is thinking about crucial conversations, right? Difficult conversations that you are any type of negotiation where you need to really, number one, I think about starting, getting back to the fundamentals, starting with heart, right?
Yep.
um, Thinking about what is it that you want for you, for others, for the relationship. There's a whole set of skills around negotiating. And part of that, really, what comes up is when I think about communication, is understanding the other's perspective. Let me just say that again. Understanding what we talked about earlier, their story and they're coming from, and spending the time listening to understand their wants and needs, right? And that is a skill. And how do you create that cocoon in order for allow that to happen, to open up and start that back and forth, right? And I wanted to call out negotiation. It's something we learn at a very young age about how to negotiate, right? Think about the toddler who wants another cookie.
Correct.
So we learned those skills very, very earlier on about, how in our family circumstance, how we're thought to negotiate. Um, and but those skills then are like there are different ways to negotiate that are getting back to sort of having that experience to build on that later. But I just wanted to call that I was thinking about that as you were as I have two teenagers and I negotiate with them all the time and they negotiate with me.
Mhm. Oh, so let's tie this right into the career. So someone's basically got their career. I think take stock of the relationship you have. We use the term relational capital. I want to throw another term out there that I think you might like better, Aoife, is relational wealth. What's what is that kind of relationship, the relationships that you've built up that you've accumulated over time that basically will help you achieve where you want to go. So you don't necessarily go out and just say, "Hey, will you be my mentor?" and you talk to a bunch of people. You build those relationships, and end up those relationships end up being deep enough that you're able to connect with this person and say, "Hey, will you mentor me? Will you help me out with this? I have this question. I have this question."
That reminds me of a
So,
slogan,
yeah.
that my network is my net worth. When
Hmm.
you talk about your connections, the wealth of who you have. But if you think of it that way, um, those are the people that will interact with you, will open the doors for you, and you'll open doors for them.
You know what else is coming up? Something about asking people for help, right? I listened to this podcast where this professor sent people out. She gave them an experiment to do, go and ask 20 people for help. It could be anything they come up with and just ask them for help. And people were so like, but the fact they set it up as an experiment and used it lightly, playful thing, um, people started doing that. And she was talking to them about the feelings that they had, like asking people for help. For some people, it was really difficult. But once they started using this lightly and just playing with it, they were amazed at when you just ask someone, "Can you help me?" Like they are amazed at how willing people were to help. It's part of our humanity, right? I think you would hope that sort of to help others, and it really inspired them to do it more. I think our fear of the word no or rejection, that fear is so very human and very real to us that it's sometimes we prefer to just hide than, than ask for help.
Yeah, so I think the power of relationships is really the power of connecting with people and then vocalizing where you want to go so that they can
Yes,
help you get there. And
beautiful.
that is really what this skill is. It's how do I connect with people and then how do I talk to them to help out so that they can help me get where I want to go.
That's so ironic, the way you mention it and how you can apply it in real time in real life. Later today, I have a I have a meeting specifically with an individual who is working hard to network and connect with strategically identified institutions on where they want to do their internship next summer. And they're ahead of the game by starting now, right? And they have sent me the list. I know the specific people within most of the organizations, and we're going to have a conversation around that. And one of the things is, first of all, they they asked me if I could help, right? That's the first step. The second is, what do you want from me and what do you want from that internship? And are you doing it just to check the box, or what skills do you want to develop? These are the things I need to ask them before I feel comfortable introducing them, right? What is your goal here? What are the parameters and expectations by the university and by yourself? And how are you going to continue to use this as a stepping stone for visibility with your career? I don't know if many of you work with universities, but there's a lot of pride taken, for example, at Stanford University, that over 50% of their graduate internships end up job offers. And that's a big deal. And so it's critically important that you are strategic and how to do that, but you've got to ask for help. And that's the part that many people are reluctant to do.
Yeah, and so I think it's interesting because a lot of people get in that thing where they don't want to ask for help. But if you're going to use your network, that's what your network's there for. It's like it your network is there to support you and you are there to support your network. It's a connection that goes both ways too. So when someone reaches out and asks for support, support them, and when you ask for support, then they might support you. Anything more on this before we jump into tech?
No, the only thing I would add to your point is experiment. Like maybe start with something
Yes.
that's comfortable, asking for help, and then work your way up, right? So don't try to take what's okay, I'm missing all my expressions here today. Like don't try to bite everything off at once, but just start with something very simple and work your way up, right? That's what I would advise so you can get comfortable with the discomfort that may perhaps be with asking for help.
I think that falls right into transition into tech. As Alec knows, I have to ask for help all the time as it pertains to tech and problem solving. And I've had to become comfortable enough. What's worse, asking for help or being embarrassed because you do it wrong? And I think that having that self-awareness of what your strengths and weaknesses are also something that happen with maturity. And how that path you learn from your mistakes. So but from there, Alec, I think we probably should move on based on time to the technology side of things.
Yeah, no, Aoife, another metaphor here, and it ties in really well with tech because how do you learn a bunch of things about technology? One bite at a time. And how do you
Oh
eat an
gosh,
elephant?
yes.
Here's the other metaphor. How do you eat
Yes.
an elephant?
Hmm.
One bite at a time. So,
Yes.
if you're trying to handle this monster of technology and understanding, man, I have to understand so many different moving parts of technology, just one bite at a time, one step at a time. What can you learn now? What can you learn today that'll help you understand this whole thing of technology? And it's moving fast. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. This is probably the fastest rate of tech progress in human history. And so I think we just have to contextualize that and realize we're probably not going to keep up with all of it, but you can keep up with as much as you can. And you're, when we're trying to keep up with all of it, everyone else is trying to keep up with tech too. So, you don't have to keep up with the, the like person who is working at Google and, actively coding and doing all these crazy things. You just got to keep up with the tools that are relevant to you today. So that's where I like to focus first, is basically take that lens, focus in on what are the tools that I need to use today and what are the tools that can help me do my work better. You don't have to worry too much about all of the other ones that are out there, the robotics and all those other components, unless those pertain to the tools that you can use today. If you're listening to this in 2030, you should probably be looking at those tools. But if you're listening to this now, um, what are the tools of today that I should be learning? And to focus that even closer, what are the tools that help me learn to other tools? So that's the ones that I focus on first. So, like, I think about AI. AI is a great learning resource for learning other things. It's like learning how to Google. If you know how to Google, you can Google anything and you can actually learn how to learn. And if you take that a step further, it's like knowing how to go to the library and look up information. If you know how to do that, you could learn a bunch of stuff. So focus on the tools that help you learn, then focus on the tools that are important to your day-to-day tasks.
I love what you said about AI. I am, because I think of that as a library, right? There's been some negative things about AI, and I understand that, but I use it as a tool when I am researching, certain aspects of if I'm pulling together a workshop or something like that to just get another perspective I could go out and I could read multiple articles and books on it, but I also kind of use AI as just another tool, like I would use anything else.
I think it's one of those things where you look at the technology, you look at all the stuff it can do, and you kind of forget that it's a tool. There's all kinds of swirling talk about AI, but at the end of the day, technology is a tool, AI is a tool, and it's something that you can leverage in your work. And understanding how you can leverage it is really part of the challenge because there's so many different ways you can do it. So I can't just sit here and just say, you can leverage AI by doing this, this, and this,
Yeah,
because there's
yeah.
20 other ways that you could probably use it.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, you have to figure out what things you're doing and what ways you could actually use it in your work. And if I'm on this podcast saying you can use it in your work this way, someone else is going to say, well, I can't use it in my work this way. And it's like, yeah, maybe you can't use it that way, but man, this tool is it's like a hammer, and it's like a hammer, it's like a hammer, a wrench, a screwdriver, all in one. It can be used for a whole bunch of things. AI is a multi-tool, and so you can use it a lot of different ways.
I would say too, from my own experience, is sort of like I think about my business and what are the one or two things that I need to focus on, right? So when I'm thinking about tools or technology tools that I could use, I start off with maybe one or two tools and get familiar with them to see if they work for me or not. And then I'll move on to the next two or three tools because it's so easy to get overwhelmed with all of the tools out there. But I also understand that I need to spend time with it. So when I'm learning a new tool, I mean, I set aside time so I could spend time playing around in the tool, and everybody learns differently. For me, it's just going in there and doing it, and then maybe pulling up a few YouTube videos or something on how to navigate it. But I think also sort of like just allowing yourself the time, and it's okay to let go of it if it doesn't work for you or seek out advice on another tool. But there's so many out there, Alex. So I appreciate what you're saying. It can be really overwhelming. So just pick one or two things and focus on that and then pick the next two or three things.
with with my with my clients on AI coaching, I just try to do, hey, let's focus on one one thing and let's
Yes.
learn that one thing. And then you give them a homework assignment and it's like, over this time, you're going to focus on this other thing. And you just take it one step at a time. You don't try to jump in and say, all right, what are all the ways we could possibly use AI? Because it's a
Bird
lot.
by bird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. You just one step at a time, just figuring out, okay, I can use it this way. And then you start showing them, yeah, you can generate images. And it's like, okay, I could use this way. And you're just adding tools to your toolbox and you're starting to understand what tools are actually available to you. And that's the big piece. And that's what I said at the front of this thing, when I said, if you don't know what a hammer can do, you won't know when to use it. That's the big problem, is there are technology tools out there and people don't know what they can do. And so they don't know when to use them. And so you want to know the tools that are out there so that you know what tools are actually in your toolbox to use them in your business.
What I wanted to call out, Alec, two things. Number one, I appreciate, you've helped me, so I appreciate your skill set because it can be overwhelming, and to be able to come to you and have you coach me on, okay, here's how to use this tool and here's how to use that tool. So I really appreciate that value. But the other thing that you're bringing up, which is getting back to sort of experience and skill set, is also in businesses evaluating those tools, right? Oftentimes I've been on the other side of the table where an investment was made in a CRM or whatever, the customer relationship management tool, whatever the case may be, without really thinking through how do we execute on this tool? How do we really use this? How will this add value to our business? And can our end users, this is the most important thing, use this tool? Like, how would it add value to their business, right? So I think that is in itself really important before investing in these tools, right? Really understanding, having someone to help them walk through and understand, how is this going to add value to my bottom line, right? Because if you build a tool and nobody uses it, There's that.
Yes.
Well, and also when typically with technology, when people actually learn more about a tool is when they're talking to the salesperson of that tool. And that's not when you want to be trying to figure out the things for that tool because you're not going to
Yes,
necessarily make the right decision right there. Because they're going to tell you all the great things it can do and they're going to want to sell you on it. The problem is they're not the person who's going to tell you if it's not the right tool for you.
correct.
And I mean, that's one of the things that I find I end up doing a lot more is saying this isn't the right tool for the job sometimes because it's hard to know. It's hard to know what tool is right for the job when there's so many out there and you go and you talk to someone and you end up talking to the salesman of that tool.
Yes. Well, I think to your point, doing that due diligence is a skill set, right? Having that unbiased mind to assess the tool and really see if it works for the business and asking the right questions, exactly to your point.
So, one thing I want to touch on here though is learning versus adoption because a lot of people get in this mode of
Mm-hmm.
I'm learning a tool, or of I'm when do I want to adopt this tool? And they think when do I want to use AI? And you don't have to just jump right in and say I'm going to use AI right now across the entire business. You can just experiment with it. Just try those little things out. Go have a conversation with it and learn about it first. I think that's one of the key things is learning these different tools and just understanding them so that you can then make an informed decision about when you actually want to jump in and actually use it somewhere. So always be learning tools. And when it comes to keeping up with technology, that's where people fall behind. They don't know the tools that are really relevant to the skill today, to the job today. And if you fall behind on the tools, think of it like you're trying to build a home without a hammer. If you're coming in and you're a carpenter, but you don't use the up-to-date tools that other home builders are using, well, then they're not going to want you to be building homes because you're not efficient at building the home and you're probably making more mistakes and there's problems there. So you want to stay up to date with the tools of the industry, and that's where you don't want to fall behind because technology goes through different phases. At this first phase, right now, for right now, AI is like a superpower. And so it goes through three effective phases. And I gave a speech on this, which Scott watched. It was great. But it's technology is a superpower, but it actually has three different stages. So it's technology is a superpower, then it becomes the norm, and then it becomes the expectation. And you
Yes.
either get to use it at those 3 points. You adopt it and you start using it at one of those 3 points. You can either use it when it's in superpower mode, you can either use it when it's the norm, or you can be brought onto that when it's the expectation. Think about a business that starts today and doesn't use the internet, or doesn't use a computer, or doesn't use a mobile phone. That would be insane because it's the expectation that you use that minimum standard of technology.
Can I add to that, Alec? I just wanted to say, because I ran into this recently, where you need to spend some time upfront if this is not your forte, understanding the technology, because just bringing out in the medical field, there's a tool about inputting when patients come in, intaking that patient. And I know that some of the physicians spent the time to get to know the tool and it saved them tremendous amount of time down the road. Sometimes you need to go slow to go fast. And I was in a conversation, some physicians did not use the tool and they were learning from their peers, like how much time it saved down the road because they were thinking, oh, I'm going to have to spend time on this.
Mhm.
But it's important that also to ask others and ask your peers. And in this case, they went back and they learned that tool because down the road it saved them a tremendous amount of time. And they just hadn't adopted it yet. I mean, of course, you have those earlier adopters, but yeah, I just wanted to call that out as you were saying that. Because sometimes you have to go slow to go fast with technology at the beginning.
Yeah, you want to invest your learning time in basically the learning that will pay off. And it's hard to know exactly what learning will pay off, but I can bet pretty confidently right now that AI is one of those that you invest in learning it today and it's going to pay off tomorrow because it's not going away. And so figuring out which technologies you should invest your time in and which ones actually have that time return. So I spent this amount of time learning Asana or Calendly or something like that, right? And you learned how to use Calendly and now you have automated booking. That saved you time. So you learned a tool, you used a tool, that tool saved you time, and then, you were able to use that time on something else. And you can actually do that cycle over and over again of learning something, getting back more time, and then reinvesting that learning time, that time saved, into learning another thing that gives you back more time. And so you can actually build this cycle of just learning and getting better, improving. The last thing I want to talk about here, and then we'll wrap up, is leverage. So technology is a huge lever. And if you're familiar with the concept of a lever, basically you have the person and you have the object on one side, and then the lever is this is basically like a stick that you would pull on or something like that, and it increases the force. It's a force multiplier. So you have your input, the force you put in, and then your output, the result of the thing, and then technology is that lever. So it's a multiplier of the force that you put in. So you can think of technology as levering or as increasing your leverage and therefore increasing your output. And that's really what is important to understand about tech is how does it increase that output? So for the input that you put in, for the hour of time that you put in, how much do you get out? And how can you use technology to increase how much you can put out? So so say you have like a paper process, right? And that allows you to move at a certain speed and do a certain amount of input. Then you level that up to a digitized process. It's on a computer now. And that speeds you up and that allows you to have more output. Then you add AI into the mix and that speeds it up even more. That allows you to multiply that input so that you have even more output. So this is the side of the technology equation as a force multiplier, as an output multiplier that allows you to get more done and do more things. And that's really the important part of keeping up with technology is staying up to date so that you can actually have the same output or greater output than someone else for your input of time.
Well, thanks for sharing that.
Thank you, Alec.
Absolutely. All right. And that's a wrap.
We want to
So,
we want to thank everybody else for coming and listening.
So thank you all for coming. Send us your questions, your feedback, your thoughts on the topic. Let us know if you're interested in being a guest or you know someone who would be a great guest. And continue the conversation in the Annovation community. That's school.com/Annovation. It's also the QR code on screen. It'll be in the description or wherever you're listening to this, below or above or beside. Like Aoife was saying, we will see you in the next meeting, hopefully. That is going to be our one on brand. That's kind of tying this all together. So we talked about traditional employment. We talked about relationships and sort of the understanding of tech. And then this brand piece is really all about kind of identity and things like that and how you can actually use that to shape your career, define your career, and go where you want to go.
Tell your story.
Tell your story. Anyways, if you liked what we were saying today, if you didn't like what we were saying today, just still, it really helps us out if you can share this with people, if you can let people know that we exist. If there's anyone in the world who you think would find this useful, please share it with them. It helps us out a lot. We're a very new podcast, and we're just trying to get out there and help people understand how you can shape your career and navigate this absolutely wild technological future that we're in. So that's pretty much it. And I'm going to play us out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do those firework things again. Can I do it? It's gonna let me do it? There it is.